What is a TV series that has a notoriously bad pilot but then went on to find great success? Parks and Rec is one that comes to mind, but they really were able to find themselves more in season 2. Another one is BoJack Horseman. Just tried to be too much of other animated shows at the time, but then halfway through season 1 it found its voice and tone. Both of these shows needed to just be their own thing rather than trying to be something that was already popular. I recently rewatched Encounter at Farpoint, the first episode of Star Trek TNG, and it was cheesy as fuck. I'm genuinely surprised I continued watching it at the time, let alone that it went on to become a good show. Eventually, the whole first season is pretty bad. The original pilot for Game of Thrones was so bad they completely redid it. The Bob's Burgers pilot feels different from the rest of the show. Between the human meat burgers and Tina's itching, it definitely isn't the same as later episodes. Seinfeld pilot is not great. The pilot wasn't awful, but Cougar Town veered very far from the original premise right away. Star Trek: The Next Generation. Encounter at Farpoint was IMO the low point of the series. Fortunately, they had plenty of time to improve. Firefly, but not because the episode was bad. Fox actively sabotaged the season. I think viewers can be unfair to pilots. In a pilot, they need to introduce the setting and the characters and establish a lot of backstory in some cases. That doesn't leave much room to be fun and entertaining. Later, once everything is established, of course it's funny, exiting interesting. Get smart. ETPS www.58A05N05 Refent 2. The pilot was so bad, they thought about not even showing up when it came for them to show the pilot to the heads of the various networks to see who might buy it. But then everything got way behind schedule, and all the shows were told they had to cut their pilot down to 8 minutes that capture the essence of the show. They just showed the bits of him using gadgets and being silly and won a contract. I never saw it on the original run, but loved it in syndication after school as a latchkey kid, watching my younger brothers and waiting for my mom to come home from her job. Good times. Star Trek, the original pilot, the cage didn't even make it to TV. They did reuse the footage in the menagerie. The first series of Blackadder was really weak compared to the rest of them when they brought in different writers to punch it up. After that, the rest were solid. Gold classics, especially Goes Forth. Star Wars, The Clone Wars, the pilot movie, as well as the first season or two were pretty bad, but now it is one of the most loved pieces of Star Wars media. Lost. The pilot crashed the plane right at the start. It wasn't notoriously bad, but I remember not really enjoying the show Merlin, and by the end I was surprised how much I liked it. The Big Bang Theory's original pilot was actually rejected. The guys were written as shy losers. The original girl character wasn't cute and was very abusive towards them, and from the few clips I've watched it was somewhat more raunchy. They rewrote the pilot, recasted the female lead, eased up on the sex innuendos, and they got much better. Still, the pilot that actually got the show approved has Sheldon going to donate sperm and Leonard telling him he was basically a pro at masturbating. Never again is it mentioned or hinted that Sheldon ever did that again. Sons of Anarchy pilot and finale, we were both meh, but the rest of the series was amazing. I think Air Disasters might have had a few examples. Avatar: The Last Airbender. When I've praised the show to adults who haven't seen it, almost the whole first season is, trust me, bros. DuckTales. Launchpad McQuack was a terrible pilot, but the show did okay. I'll show myself out. I wouldn't even let my husband watch season 1 of Parks and Rec, we just start on season 2. Check out the Seinfeld pilot. It's terrible imho. I remember seeing it and thinking, this show is dead on arrival. No way this goes anywhere lol. The Office is probably the first one that comes to mind. The pilot feels pretty rough compared to how good the series eventually became. I didn't see Cheers mentioned yet. I didn't think the pilot was terrible, but objectively, it was at the very bottom of ratings and would have been cancelled had nothing been available to replace its slot. Of course, the viewers eventually came around because it was fantastic with a mix of strong characters, humor, and emotion. The IT Crowd, Us version, while it didn't get picked up, the pilot was so bad, it only leaked on Facebook in 2012. Joel McHale as a slob does a work, and glad he was casted in Community. The jokes were 1-1 the British version, but they weren't funny at all. Hangin' with Mr. Cooper. Notoriously bad is probably overstating it, but the pilot, Analogous S1, for Psych had an entirely different vibe. The humor wasn't there, Sean wasn't as likable, and overall it felt like they were shooting for something more grown-up than the wonderfully juvenile detective comedy we got in the end. Star Trek. The first pilot was rejected, but they were given a second chance. Is the Buffy pilot considered good? Not a pilot technically, but the first episode of American Horror Story Hotel was so graphic that most people simply walked away. They killed that storyline instantly, and went on to have probably the most complete story of Ryan Murphy's career and my favorite season of the show. Spartacus. That first episode is truly garbage, yet the rest of the show is completely different after they drop the 300 theme of storytelling. After episode 4, it's a much greater show. Does the original Star Trek count? The pilot episode with Captain Pike that was later reworked into the following season. The pilot episode of Bones was just awful. So badly written, such terrible characters with no chemistry. I'm amazed it got greenlit, let alone aired. The series subsequent was really good fun, like night and day. The Simpsons. First episodes were weird and lifeless. 30 Rock. The pilot was an oddly heavy episode, with few visual gags or one-liners. It was more character-driven and introspective immediately from episode 2. It became more and more surreal, lighthearted, with very quick, very frequent visual gags and punchlines. Doctor Who. The first serial is really rather dull. The Daleks is what brought in the audience. Not sure if it counts as you don't have to watch episodes in order, but Black Mirror. I thought the Community pilot is pretty mediocre, but it found its humor pretty quickly after that. Banshee. I always tell people you gotta get through the first episode, but by 3 you will be hooked and see the magic. How good could the Lost pilot have been? He crashed into an island. The Office is an interesting one. The first episodes were a direct remake of the British version, which had a true documentary feel. It was awkward, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes you were unsure if this was real or staged. But that was all deliberate. That approach didn't really land with American audiences, and it morphed into a more standard sitcom style. The first Star Trek episode was deemed kind of boring for a pilot and too much of a slow burn, so they fired the entire cast, except Spock, and filmed a second pilot, removing Captain Pike and getting Captain Kirk. And then eventually they made an entire prequel series about Pike's adventures on the Enterprise. Twin Peaks international pilot gave away a lot of key plot points, not at all bad, but surprising for a show built around mystery. Went on to change the face of TV. Top Gear's first season when it came back was pretty bad. James May wasn't there then. He arrived late in season 2 and it started to pick up then.